This is the GeoSketch Tools video for the LOD tool, which is new in GeoSketch 2.0. LOD refers to level of detail, and it is constructing alternative representations of features so that the visualization system can choose between these representations. So to illustrate this, for this V-shaped building, we can use the arrow keys. The up arrow key will display the highest level of detail for that building, where we've got more complex representation of the roof structures. The down arrow key will display the lowest level of detail, in which we did not model the V shape or the round back corner or edge of that building. And the left and right keys will incrementally step through the various levels of detail. We're at the lowest level of detail now, so the right arrow will go up to the next level of detail, which has a simple representation for the roof structure, and then one more right arrow click will show the highest level of detail, which has more detail in the roof structure. So for this example, we're going to add another level of detail description to this rectangular building. The first step is to make the building into a group. So we'll triple click on the building and right click and select Make Group. And now we're going to define, I'll illustrate just adding a level of detail to an existing group. If we go to Window and select Outliner and expand our hierarchy, this is currently just a simple group. We have the ability to right click either in the geometry window or in the outliner window, and then we can define that we're going to make this group a level of detail. So I'll select that, and this is where we can specify the switch in and switch out distance, where you can use significant size and the various attributes of a level of detail as defined by the open flight specification. So we can put in a name here which will rename our group. So we'll call this, well, right now just give it a temp name because I'm going to be changing that later. And so when we select OK, that has been defined as a level of detail. Now when we right click on it again, now that it is a level of detail, we can either edit the level of detail settings, or we can choose to remove the level of detail. So in this case, I'll select to remove the level of detail, and if I just click no, it will keep the group. If I click yes, then it will also delete that group. So in this case, I'll select no, I just want to remove the level of detail settings. And then we can rename this. You can either rename it inside of the level of detail panel or use the context menu in the outliner window, and I'll call this the rectangular building. So that is now a separate group, and we can edit that group, and we want to add some detail to the roof structure on this building. So we'll use the GeoSketch Line tool, and first we'll select an edge and hit the tab key to add it to our inferencing buffer, so that as we create geometry it'll inference to that, and I'll collapse the outliner window. So now if I select the corner of this structure, when I get parallel to that edge, it'll snap to it, and I'll continue to get inferencing so that I get 90-degree corners as I go around this profile, and then at the end it'll line it up with the start point, and then I can use the push-pull tool to extrude the height of that. Then we'll use the rectangle tool to do these air conditioner units. The rectangle tool of GeoSketch is handy because you can give the orientation of the rectangle and extrude that to a proper height. So now I want to take these two features and make them into an LOD. So in the select tool, I'll select the top face of this one, hold down the control key and the top face of this one, then I'll right click, and in the GeoSketch LOD context menu, we can either create an LOD just from that selection, or we can create an LOD from the adjacent faces as well, which is what I want. I want to get these side faces. So I'll choose that option. So now we're creating an LOD, and I'll just say this is the AC unit. And I'll give in switch in distance of about 1,500 feet. These are relatively low distances, but for this demo I want to be able to see the switching occurring for realistic numbers you'd have higher numbers so that you could not see the switching occurring. So I define that, and I'll select OK. And now in my hierarchy, under this rectangular building, I have an LOD, which is the AC unit. So in addition to the up and down arrows that I showed for swapping between the levels of detail, we also have the ability to turn Auto LOD on. Auto LOD is currently off, and I'll use the control key to toggle between them. So I hit the control key, now Auto LOD is on, so as I zoom out, the levels of detail will switch. So right now I'm at the very simple representation of the V-shaped building and the simple representation of the rectangular building. As I move the arrow, I see the other features I just got within the 1500 feet, so these popped up, and I'm still at the simple representation of this. And as I move in, I get the intermediate representation of the roof of the V-shaped building, and then I get the higher level detail. So for looking at the settings for the level of detail, there's a feature in the LOD tool such that if I turn on the Ruby console and I hit the tab key, I will get a listing of all the LODs in the model sorted by their switch-in distance. So the lowest switch-in distance comes first, and I can see all the various levels of detail and what the settings are for its switch-in and switch-out distance and significant size. This is handy if you need to do some editing. If you pull up the panel for editing one particular LOD, you can have a reference to the other LODs in the model to see what their settings are. If you want more detail, you can hold down the Shift key and hit Tab, and then you get a diagram of the hierarchy of the model, and it also gives the number of polygons in each level of the hierarchy. So for the V-shaped building, the simple representation of it is 7 polygons, while the complex representation of it is 16 polygons. Plus you have the additive LODs for the roof. The simple version has 30 polygons. The more complex one has 51 polygons. And we can see all the LOD settings here as well. So in addition to that tool for viewing the settings, we have some tools to use for determining what you set for the LOD switch in and switch out distances. The simplest one is just to put the cursor at some place in your model, and then in the status window down at the bottom, it'll tell you how far that point is from your eye distance. So then if you zoom out, you'll get a measure of the distance from the eye to that location in your model. And I still have the Auto LOD on, so I'll hit the control key to toggle it off. So in addition to that, in the prompt it says that we can double click for a bounding center. So if I double click on a feature, then it shows me the bounding box for that, and now I'm measuring the distance from my eye point to that bounding center. And as I zoom out, it will cause the window to stay centered on that center point of that bounding box, and it'll give me the measure of the distance from the eye to that center point. And then one last feature is for setting significant size. Significant size means that you're going to establish a distance and then use that distance to control when the switch in and switch out occurs, and it will occur when that distance becomes 1 pixel. So to illustrate that, we might select an edge up here, and we'll single click on that edge, and now our prompt tells us that that edge is 12 feet 10 1/4 inches long. That'll be in whatever units you're currently set as your model units, but at this viewing that is represented by 140 pixels, and that's just it does not take into account if you're looking at it on edge. It's just that length of a feature will take up that many pixels at this resolution or this scale. So as I zoom out, it'll stay centered on the center of that edge, and it's telling me, for example, that at this zoom it's 15 and about a half a pixel. And then as I keep zooming out, once that gets down to 1 pixel, that is the viewing distance at which that feature would be switched out if I set its significant size to the 12 feet 10 1/4 inches. So those features are intended to assist the modeler in setting the various attributes of the LOD. Of course, it will depend on what your target visualization system is as to whether you use the switch in and switch out distances or the significant size. And that concludes the LOD tool.